Well, hello everybody once again. Welcome back to yet another episode of Water Tanks with CS. This is going to be a fairly mundane episode. Also, do note that the material for this episode has been sitting on my hard drive for well over a month. Obviously, due to my absence and having had to go overseas, I just simply never had a chance to finish wrapping this up. But here we are. This replay, it's nothing special, should I say, aside from the fact that, we have a few special guests who are playing with me in this. Pillow and I believe Mr. Iron Cross, except his username is in the German term. For people who are used to following tanks replays on YouTube, they tend to make a big deal about replays during which there's a very large number of kills and plenty of spots and probably a lot of damage done. But ultimately, regardless of a player's contribution and skill, there's always going to be a degree of luck to those replays, because ultimately you kind of require your own team to be kind of sucky and incompetent, and I guess they have to screw up in order for there to be so many enemies and so much enemy health for you to eliminate. But this replay, in a sense, kind of more or less showcases what happens if everybody mostly do their job and keep calm and lay low and play with their brain instead of their guts and their heart, which is not a bad thing. And to be honest, at this point, the player base as well as the game community can almost certainly use more of that. As you know, everybody who has been playing this game knows that, chaos and train wreck is pretty standard stuff, and it kind of gets aggravating after a while, unfortunately. Anyway, so myself and Pillow are in our Object 430s. Meanwhile, Iron Cross is actually in his 140. The 430 was essentially one of the early prototypes for the T-64 mean bottle tank, which is one of the earliest second generation mean bottle tanks in the world, with the autoloader, smoothbore guns, and composite armor. It's known for being very compact and low profile. In this game, the DPM for the 430 is astronomical. In terms of armor, the frontal hull has 120mm, which is better than both the 62A and 140. The sides are a little iffy. I believe there's patches of like 40 or 50mm, and the side armor kind of relies more on angle than thickness, which means sometimes your sides will be overmatched or splashed by HE or artillery, which is ultimately problematic. In terms of handling in this game, the 430, it's high DPM, but slightly derpier than its siblings. As in, slightly more bloom and slightly higher ground resistance. But all in all, it's still fairly good and fairly solid. And as you can see, the depression is usable, but nothing to write home about. 5 degrees. Which, if you know what you're doing, you're totally fine. But if you've been spoiled by British and American tanks, and you're just simply not used to this, you might struggle. But in terms to the ballistics of your weapon, it has no problem cutting right through that Tiger II right there at all. After all, it's a tier 10 weapon with well over 260mm penetration, and it shoots APCR ammunition natively. In that regard, I can almost say that shooting APCR, it's better than shooting heat, because heat is not so good for spaced armor, angled armor, and tracks and modules. And here's another thing to take notice. I'm shooting HE, or should I say spamming HE on the Borsig. That's because the Borsig essentially has about as much armor as a Coke can, which means, you know, shooting HE at him will afford you higher alpha rolls and, you know, contribute artificially to even a higher DPM than how much you natively have if you're shooting APCR. Also, HE has higher potential for causing module damage, so maybe attack his ammo rack, his fuel tank, his gun, or kill his crew, which are all good things. The Borsig, once again, it's a glass cannon that very much relies on its handling, so by causing module damage, you stand a good chance to minimize the upper hand he has, which is nice. And now we are trying to make the most out of our mobility, if you will. When your tanks are so agile, in principle you do not want to stand and fight, but much better you want to relocate. You want to stay on your feet, stay mobile, and be a skirmisher, for the lack of a better word. Well, extra points for you if you know where the soundtrack came from. Who knows? I mean, this stuff may already be too old for kids these days. Never cease to amaze me how old I am now. Anyways, we got BIA. I got Steel Wall of all things. That goes to show the fairly solid armor the 430 has. But you know, I think most of the Russian mediums have reasonable armor, a higher tier. They're definitely not paper. And here we are. Myself and Pillow did roughly the same damage. Iron Cross did slightly less. Well, quite a bit less. But he has more HP, or should I say XP. Probably because he did more assist and more spotting. But this is exactly what you want to see on your team. I mean, sure, we had 2 tier tanks that did absolutely nothing in terms of damage, but a good number of our tanks did fairly solid damage. So the burden in the game, or should I say the burden of winning the game, it's nice and evenly spread out. So as I said, as fun as, you know, those hard carrying miraculous situations are entertaining to watch, arguably they should not be what you want to rely on to achieve consistent victory. And as I've mentioned before, consistency as well as, you know, something that's good and manageable that you can consistently repeat, in many ways is always better than the occasional freak accident that's extraordinary. Well, until next time, feel free to subscribe.